Peace and the mercy and blessings of God be with you all. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally. In this segment for Let the Quran Speak, I want to discuss with you the history of the rise and development of readings and manuscripts of the Quran. Today, most Muslims read the Quran in a text that is referred to as the Egyptian edition of 1924. That's how scholars refer to it. Most Muslims may not have realized that this is the designation for that manuscript, for that text to Muslims in general. This is just simply the Quran. But this is not the only text of the Quran that is read throughout the world. In North Africa, there is a slightly different text that is based on a slightly different reading, mostly corresponding to what we read in the rest of the world, but with some slight variations that do not affect anything that Muslims believe and do not have any major impact on any Muslim practices. And then too, in some parts of Africa, there is another reading of the Quran and a matching manuscript that is prevalent. And here too, we find some slight variations that do not affect Muslim beliefs and do not affect Muslim practices in any significant degree. So how do we make sense of all of this? We want to retrace the history of how these manuscripts became divergent. How is it that we have a variety of readings of the Quran and manuscripts to match, or rather even now printed texts to match? Now, today, in a Muslim college in which imams are being trained to serve the community, an imam, if he specializes in the recitations of the Quran, he may be taught as many as 10 different recitations of the Quran. And these 10 recitations complement each other. They basically, again, have no effect on the beliefs of Muslims, and they do not affect in any significant degree the practices of Muslims. So we want to get a grip of this. How did all of this come to pass? Muslim scholars have made sense of this by referring to a tradition according to which the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, said that the Quran has been revealed in 7 ahruf. And I have to come back and explain that term, ahruf. In any case, that tradition says you can recite of any of these, whichever is easy for you. And moreover, that each one of them by itself is complete, and each one serves as a healing. Now, to use comparable language from our Christian friends, we see that sometimes there is the statement, that which is sufficient for your salvation. So it looks like what this tradition is saying is that if you read according to any one of the readings, then this is sufficient for your salvation. And with this in mind, it gives great comfort to the average Muslim knowing that you can read just one of these readings in one text, like, for example, the 1924 Cairo edition of the Quran, and that is sufficient for you as a book of guidance. It is sufficient for you to have salvation, because again, the various readings do not change anything that Muslims believe and do not affect the practices of Muslims in any significant degree. So it's not like one of these readings is going to tell you that there is only one God, and another reading is going to say, hey, wait a minute, there is another God along with God. No, the central beliefs of Muslims are all unaffected by these variety of readings. But now, the tradition says that the Quran has been revealed in the 7 modes. Now, I said ahruf previously, that's an Arabic word, and the singular is harf, which means letter. So it literally means 7 letters. But this word could also mean edge. The word harf could mean edge. So maybe it means 7 limits. And in fact, Muslim scholars have not been able to define this term with any unanimity. And a wide variety of opinions have been given as to what this term means. What does it mean to say that the Quran has been revealed according to 7 edges or 7 letters? It may mean, according to some scholars, that the Quran has been revealed according to 7 dialects of the Arabic language. So whereas there was today one standard Arabic language, which is called Modern Standard Arabic, the language that is the language of textbooks and newspapers and magazines and news broadcasts and so on, that being an official language, there will be a wide variety of spoken languages in the Arab world. To the extent that sometimes the people of one region cannot understand the people of another region, though each one understands themselves to be speaking the Arabic language. Something like this may have prevailed even within the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace. So there were regional dialects of the Arabic language, and it looks like the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, may have permitted his companions in the initial phase to recite the Qur'an in terms of its meaning, to express that meaning in their familiar terms and their modes of expression according to their dialects. So we must now think back to that time and how it is different from our present time. In our present time, we have the Quran coming at the end of a long period of historical progression leading to our present time. And in our present time, we have people who are specialized in the Quran. They devote their lives to studying the Quran. So they have every tool and apparatus at their disposal to make sure that they're reciting the Quran in a very precise way. And we want to insist on the precise recitation, because if everybody goes changing the Quran this way and that way, eventually it can go way out of whack, and one would lose the essential message. However, this situation that we encounter now is different from the situation in the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace. In our present situation, we lay a great emphasis on preserving the Quran letter for letter, word for word, because we want to make sure that nobody's going to change it. In the time of the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, the most important impetus was to ensure that the message of the Quran would be absorbed and put into practice and taught to others. So the precise words, which are the vehicles through which the important teachings are being disseminated, were not so important. The teachings were important, but the precise words to preserve them were not of paramount importance. They did not trump in importance the need for the message of the Quran to be absorbed, to be practiced, and to be taught by others. And in fact, if the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, had insisted on his followers that they should pay due importance to the wording of the Quran to get every letter and sound correctly, then that may have detracted from the focus on getting the message across and implementing that in the lives of new Muslims. So with all of the challenges that the community faced in that early phase, it was important for the Muslims to focus on the meaning and the message and to circulate that. So one Muslim would go tell another one, look, we got a new teaching in the form of the Quran. The other one is asking, what does the Quran say? And then he repeats the saying and the teaching of the Quran without necessarily getting precisely the same words in which they were first delivered by the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace. So there was this period in which Muslims had the opportunity to teach others the Quran without insisting on the precise words. But then it came a phase when, if we allow this to continue ad infinitum, you can imagine that somebody gives it in their own words, and then somebody else gives that new summary in their own words, and then the third person gives it in their own words. Then eventually the whole message can become diluted. The original words will be lost. So how to capture the original words? It is said that the Caliph Uthman Uthman, on whom be peace, commissioned a committee of some Muslims who were known to be good reciters of the Quran, skilled in the Arabic language, so that they could write it properly. He commissioned this committee to produce a copy of the Quran and to make copies of that and send those copies to the various parts of the Muslim empire. There are reports as well that prior to him, a previous caliph, Abu Bakr, had commissioned one of the persons in this committee, Zayd bin Thabit, to make such a collection, and that collection had been kept in his possession, the possession of the caliph, until he passed away, and then passed on to the second caliph, who then, on his death, left it in the care of his daughter, who, Hafsa, was a wife of the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, and therefore for Muslims, one of the mothers of the believers. So these are all trustworthy individuals caring for and preserving the Quran. Now, when Uthman radiallahu anh wanted to commission this committee to make copies of this, he then got Zayd bin Thabit, who made the initial copy, together with the others, to go through back over the whole process, collecting the pieces again, comparing with this original copy, and then making further copies and sending them to various parts of the Muslim empire. And so Muslims have made efforts at various stages to preserve, first, the meaning and message of the Quran, secondly, the text of the Quran in a written form, and thirdly, to copy it and send it out to various parts of the Muslim empire so that Muslims would have a reliable written record in addition to the memorized text of the Quran, so that both memory and writing would serve as the two modes in which the Quran has been protected and preserved and passed on verbatim to Muslims throughout the generations. Now, of course, we have to explain how did these variety of readings still manifest. Well, the text in which Uthman, on whom be peace, Uthman, may God be pleased with him, had preserved the Quran, was written without vowel points and without dots that distinguish between look-alike letters. We'll have to come back in a subsequent segment to explain this in further detail, but in a nutshell, the text that Uthman prepared could be interpreted, could be read in a variety of ways, and that's one of the reasons why we have, surviving to this day, a variety of recitations, some of which may go back to the time of the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace. In fact, it is a common Muslim belief that we are not allowed to invent anything in the Quran, and it is generally presumed that all of these readings must somehow go back to the early teachers, even those within the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, those who heard the Quran directly from the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself, the messenger of God. That's all the time we have for this segment, but in a future segment, we will look at more details regarding the rise and development of readings and manuscripts of the Quran. Thank you for watching this segment. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally. If you're interested in more segments of Let the Quran Speak, visit our website, www.quranspeaks.com. That's where you can send us your questions, your comments, and your donations as well.